Okay, now what we're going to talk about tonight is it's very good to look at basics. You know, like, so first of all, what we're looking at is that as a human being, Dayananda gave a definition of samsara that I'd never heard before. I used to think of samsara as, you know, there's this big thing we're caught in, and I felt like we're kind of a victim of it, you know, but he gave an existential definition of samsara, and basically it is that we are constantly engaged in a process, a compulsive, relentless pursuit of trying to find happiness and security in the world. So this actual activity is samsara, which is interesting because that means that it's centered on me. It's centered on me. And so liberation or freedom while living is freedom from this samsaric process. This is what, you know, to be free from samsara means that I am no longer trying to seek and find happiness and security in the world of changing appearances. So we all clear on that? It's quite a remarkable thing. Dayananda also had another amazing thing, and what he said was, he said, the reason that people are seeking to be happy is that they're unhappy already. Now, I know that's a pretty basic statement, but when I first heard it, I thought, that's quite insightful. Must be a hell of a lot of unhappy people. And because this seeking of something better, something rosier, something magnificent, something that's going to do it for me in the future, who's ever been engaged in that kind of process? That they have the idea in their head that one day in the future they're going to finally get it, right? So, and this is our psychology, because, but what we've got in mind is always an ideal experience that we're going to have, an experience. That's what we're looking off. But the interesting thing is that it means that basically samsara is a movement away from an unhappiness to a perceived happiness. Does that make sense? It's a movement. And you see, the thing is that at the basis of this movement is what Swami Dayananda calls self-dissatisfaction. Self-dissatisfaction. Now, self-dissatisfaction is the fundamental conflict within us as a person. This is the definition of the unhappiness that's centered on me, self-dissatisfaction. I hate being what I am like. Okay? I hate being what I am like. Who's ever had the experience of themselves that they hate? Who's ever had that experience of themselves that they hate? Think of the last time you had an argument with your spouse. What happened was, normally speaking, what happens is the experience is they've pissed me off. Who's ever had the experience that they've genuinely and honestly felt that the actions of another person have made them very upset? Who's ever had that experience? Well, it's not quite like that. You see, what happens is, before the spouse said or did something, you had self-dissatisfaction. I hate being what I'm like. And you had managed to manage your spouse to make sure that you didn't feel that. Maybe even to have the feeling of not having that. Like, instead of I hate being what I'm like, I like being what I'm like. I feel good about myself. But then your spouse very inconveniently does or says something you don't like, and suddenly you're thrust back on the feeling of I hate being what I'm like. So what happens is that in that moment, I hate being what I'm like. I am not being what Swami Dayananda would say self-accepting. Now, what he means by self-accepting isn't self-objectification, like I get a picture of myself and say, okay, I accept myself. It's not that dualistic process, I accept the self that I think I am. Self-acceptance is I am being with myself as I am without resistance. Okay? I'm with myself as I am without that ninja stance, or he called it, or the fighting, the friction. Are you with me? So normally speaking, who's ever heard, now Swami Dayananda, he gave a principle. When I first heard this, I thought, oh, it can't be this easy. This is not right. I can't believe this, right? And what he said was, he said, the basis of reaction is non-acceptance of a fact. The basis of reaction. Now, what he meant by reaction was getting lost. The dramatization. The dramatization. Now, the dramatization, so we have in Vedanta, we got two very essential understandings. Or we've got being itself, and then we've got becoming. Now, becoming is the dramatization of myself as personality. It is a movement from self-dissatisfaction, I hate being what I'm like, to something better, to a position where I'm, instead of me, I hate being what I like, I want to feel good about myself. It's this effort to become, it's the craving to be. I'm being this and I need to be this in order to be happy. Who's ever had that experience? Now, what's not pointed out psychologically, which is very important, we're terribly afraid of self-dissatisfaction. Now, you can tell this is true because of this. Who here has ever got angry at their spouse because they've said done something you don't like? Who's ever experienced that kind of anger where you want to change them? Now, what drives that? So it's not just simply I hate being what I'm like. I'm afraid of being in self-dissatisfaction. I'm afraid to be self-hating. So, and the fact of the matter is, human beings are self-hating. All right, they are. That is fundamental. This is what, this is the underlying psychological basis of a human being. That's why hatred is so delicious, because when you're hating the bad guys, you're dramatizing your self-hatred by projection. By Freud called it projection. There's nothing quite as delicious as righteous self-hatred. Have you felt, who's ever experienced the delicious feeling of being morally indignant about the wrongness of others? Who's ever had that? Because what happens is it's our defense against this tremendous fear and this tremendous self-hatred. And normally speaking, so what happens when our spouse says or does something we don't like? Who's noticed that they move, that as soon as that happens, you move outwards in order to try and change the spouse so you can feel good about yourself again inside? Who's ever had that experience? This is human life. This
But
constant. Sorry?
But may I ask you?
Yeah.
What is the root of this self-dissatisfaction? Why it happens?
Well, the thing is that if we, from a Vedantic point of view, if we really understood what we really are, right, we would have no self-hatred. But because we're lost, we don't know what it means to be ourselves. We know what it means to be a self, so we're in darkness. We're actually cut off from our source. In our Western scriptures, have you ever heard the saying about the withered vine, the branch cut off from the vine? If the branch is cut off from the vine, it's horrible and miserable. It feels intrinsically, ontologically, it feels yuck. It can't possibly be happy. All right, or imagine if you're cut off from the light. It's cold and it's dark. Okay, it's miserable and dark, and so it's this being cut off from the life, light, and fullness that is God, which is abidingly present. This sense of separation, of ignorance of that at any one moment, this is our fundamental problem. So it's ignorance. Okay, it's ignorance. It's not sin. In our Western tradition, there is this thing that you're intrinsically bad and all of that stuff. It's not that. Okay, it's more like Socrates. Our problem is that we're ignorant. All right, is that clear? But this ignorance, the early fathers, they, in our Western tradition, they wondered, well, how did we fall away from perfection? But the big question is, well, it doesn't really matter because we're continually doing it today. So, it's like what the Buddha says, when you're in agony and you've got an arrow, you don't discuss who put the arrow in there, why did they do it? What you do is you get the arrow. You with me? Because it's not possible to come to an understanding of it intellectually or even philosophically, but we can say metaphysically, if you like, or philosophically, that human life is a deprivation of goodness, beauty, and truth. We can say that quite clearly. It's not very hard to come to that conclusion because we just have to look around. We just have to turn the TV on. Okay, so here we have this movement of becoming. And so the movement of becoming, and again, what he says, the basis of it is, the movement is because the becoming is a reaction. And what's the basis of reaction? Non-acceptance of a fact. And what's the fact? I hate being what I'm like. Okay, now, so, yep.
I'm having a little problem with the last statement. So you're not calling a fact that you hate being what you like.
That's a fact. Yes, that's a fact. Yes. When my wife.
Well, so just to understand how we're talking about this.
Yep.
So so the point is that you're going to accept that you hate being what you like.
Well, I'm going to go into that, but we're going to go. I'm just saying that the reality is we're looking at our life as an individual living in this world. We're not looking at our life as Satchitananda or any of that stuff. We're talking about as an individual in this world. I appreciate the fact that I can become self-hating. And then what I do is I compulsively try and either change my mind, like in the sense that I might be, unhappy somehow and I hate it, like I'm feeling depressed and I hate it, or someone said something I don't like and I hate it, or the world is like I don't like and I hate it. And so that when I'm involved in the process of becoming, I'm going to try and change something away from me in order for me to feel better. I'm going to be moving away from myself in order to feel better. Have you ever argued with your wife, Robert?
Well, yes.
Right. And when you're doing that, you're trying to change her so that you can feel better.
Well, that's not how I rationalize it.
Of course it's not.
That's
No,
exactly what I say.
absolutely not. I mean, this is the vision of the teacher.
Are good.
The vision of the teaching is much different from the general thing. I mean, our experience is that the reason we're upset is because the person is difficult. We genuinely believe that the world is actually, the meaning of my suffering is the thoughts or feelings that are coming in my mind that I find unacceptable, or the actions of other people that I find unacceptable, or the condition of the world is unacceptable. But from our position, from our from the vision of the teaching, the real meaning of my suffering is I am cut off from the light, life, and fullness that is God. Okay, that's the real meaning. And the world, by the way, would agree with you, Robert. Yes, it's your wife that's pissed you off. Yeah, I've got one like that too, you know. But the thing is that when we have that as a premise that things external to us are the cause of me being upset, there's absolutely no solution. But if I believe the object away from me is the cause, I cannot help but compulsively keep on trying to change it.
All right, that's
And
clear. Thank you.
so we're stuffed, you know. But notice how we're enclosed in samsara. Yes, Judy?
So, and this is something that's been going on lately. So
Yep.
if the thoughts that are occurring in my mind, and I recognize the thoughts as they're occurring, that they're on the negative spin of things, right? But I'm not projecting them out, but I'm seeing them. But because when I watch them, my somehow, I guess I'm self-reflecting or something, or putting it on, because now my whatever state I was in being present has now, I've got this really unhappy feeling, you know.
Well, no,
So
you see, we're going to go into that. The thing is that when you're remaining with your thinking or feelings as they are,
yeah,
if you are in actual fact remaining with yourself as you are,
okay,
self-dissatisfaction, I hate being what I'm like, is not there. It may be still negative, but there's not the friction.
okay, there's not the but it actually shifts the feeling. The feeling shifts.
No, we'll go. I'm going to go into that.
Okay.
See,
That's good.
fundamentally, we've got two options as far as Dyananda is concerned. We either resolve ourselves as we are in the presence of reality, or we get busy becoming.
Yeah, okay.
That's it. If you wanted to put it to the essential thing, at any one moment, I'm either being or becoming. But when I am becoming, what I'm doing is I am desperately wrestling with the world to change it in order to make myself okay in myself, in order for me to feel good about myself. How important is it to feel good about yourselves these days, you know? To be a better version of yourself so you can feel good about yourself. All right, Kevin, what were you going to say, something?
Look, like I like how you've been presenting, you've got a certain focus, but just for Robert's query, and I think you've sort of talked about it a bit, that we're not normally aware that we're suffering self-dissatisfaction or self-hatred at all. The fact that we're disliking situations, other people, and is actually a psychological projection, or it's a self-defense mechanism, which is what personality is, projecting that self-dissatisfaction. So I don't experience it. I just think you're the problem. I think the situation.
What happens is we're so afraid of self-dissatisfaction, we keep well away. You see, we don't even, you notice that someone says has done something you don't like, and suddenly you're fighting straight away. Boom, you're into it. You're reacting, because we don't want to even get anywhere near this feeling, I hate being what I'm like. See, Dyananda says the fundamental problem centered on the individual is self-dissatisfaction and fear. Right now, by the way, this self-dissatisfaction and fear, as Kevin is saying, is universally denied. Universally denied.
But it represents human life.
Absolutely. It fuels becoming. It's the basis of becoming. It's the basis of reaction is non-acceptance of a fact. This is magnificent, by the way, because there's a solution here, you see. You see, all my life, I used to struggle with life. Who's ever struggled with their emotional reactions and thinking, struggled with it because they didn't find it acceptable, they didn't like it, they didn't wish it was there? Who's ever done that? Now notice the fundamental of human life or human psychology is the fact of conflict, friction. And have you noticed with friction, there's a certain friction. So we can have friction with ourselves. Who's ever, and when we've got friction with ourselves, and fundamentally all our problems is friction with ourselves. But then when we project it out, we then have friction with others because we want to change them to deal with the friction in ourselves. Does that make sense? Like if I could only just change Sylvia into the exact woman that I need and want, my life would be just idyllic. And I'm trying very hard to bring that about. Okay. Am I succeeding? No, she just won't get in. She won't get with the program. All right. Now, so this is this whole thing of emotional dependence. Now, we have to look at this quite seriously because the whole purpose of Advaita, isn't it? It's the whole purpose of it is to discover what does it mean to be free while living. To be free while living. You see what I mean? We're going to engage in functional living. The wonderful thing is we don't have to, at any one moment, we don't have to engage in becoming. We don't have to be in, we can be released from the process of becoming. Right? But as a becoming person, I can't get rid of my becoming because that's more becoming. Who's ever tried to fix themselves? So even fixing yourself is in the process of becoming. I notice that I'm a bit of a jerk. Ooh, I better do something about myself. And then I get busy trying to change myself in order to feel better. I'm not talking about changing conduct here. We need to, I'm talking about my state of being. Who's ever tried to change their state of being? Okay, so we have these two fundamental things that we're looking at as we're looking at this constant, relentless compulsion to deal with something external to myself in order to deal with myself so that I can finally arrive at happiness. Okay. But what if happiness is just completely it's what happens if for all my strivings, it can never work? What if happiness can never be attained in the action of becoming? Now, first of all, it's a very, very good thing to become disillusioned about life. This is a very spiritual thing. This is reality actually kicking into your life saying, sorry, but life has got a promise that it can't fulfill. Do you see what I mean? Like this week, a best friend of mine, my childhood friend, he died. Didn't like it. And also another close friend of mine who's a Shin priest, he's got cancer. He's got about 2 weeks to live. So it's just nothing. This endeavor to find fulfillment in the world, it's a zero-sum game. Because see, in terms of our life, we know for one thing, we have as a physical entity, as St. Thomas Aquinas said, I'm made up of parts, aren't I? And the parts tend to come apart. As a physical entity, one way or another, at some time or another, I'm going to face old age, sickness, and death as a physical entity. Is that true? That's just the truth. So, and we try to deal with this fact through space and time. Becoming is an operation, is being a psychophysical entity operating in space and time in order to try and be happy forever. So we seek the infinite in the temporal. Well, good luck. But this is what everyone does. The question is timelessness to be found in space and time in this activity of becoming? What do you think? What do you think? I mean, is there any hope there? Now, there's relative hope. You can look after food, clothing, and shelter, and you can maintain yourself as best you can. But all of the activity of that is going to be limited. It has limitation. All right? So just before I go on, I just want you to just relay what's clear in terms of what I mean by becoming. I just want you to get this notion that we as human beings can get caught into, at any one moment, it's not like maybe occasionally I get into becoming. Often we're in becoming. Our life and being is completely enclosed in becoming. All right, so Judy, just so in your own words, what's clear about this process of becoming?
Just for me, the process of becoming is that it's allowing at that moment, whatever it is, the acceptance of it, because anything other than allowing.
Well, that's not becoming. That becoming is the non-accept. I just want to concentrate on the.
Oh, you want me? Okay.
I'm not. No, I'm not. We're not. I haven't got to that yet, Judy. I'm just talking about.
Oh, okay.
I want to be clear on this process, this movement from self-dissatisfaction. I hate being what I'm like, to some starry-eyed, wonderful future that I hope to get.
Well, the becoming is just it's like this outside striving. It's a striving for me. When I'm in the becoming, it's somehow I can change this, not functionally change it, but change this because the way I'm envisioning it is not the way it's happening.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm striving for that.
So becoming is trying to deal with something external to deal with the fear and self-dissatisfaction centered on self. Okay, very good. Michelle.
I'm wondering if when we are in acceptance,
I want to go into that. I'm going to go into that, so, but I want to be clear on the fact. Are you clear on the fact that you can see the meaning of becoming in the sense of this relentless, compulsive movement away in order to try and get some kind of happiness and security in myself through things external to me?
That's right. It's because of the external aspect of it that cannot work, actually.
No.
So the yeah. Okay, good. I got it.
It's a promise that the world is not going to keep. The greatest delusion is the world can give me happiness or the world can give me unhappiness.
Unhappiness, yes.
The basis of unhappiness has actually been cut off from reality. It's not because the world doesn't do what you want. Okay. Very
good. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we're looking at foundational thinking. Andre.
Okay.
Well, I would say that I can change about becoming.
Just the meaning of becoming. I just stick with the meaning of becoming.
I want to change myself, let's say, somehow. To change a direction of my attention. Not to feel emotional pain.
Right, exactly. So what happens is I'm feeling emotional pain of rejection, therefore it becomes highly attractive that if I get approval and love, because I feel that's going to do it for me, right?
Sure.
But it's an emotional dependence, and I'm going to lose, actually, because even if Sylvia loves me 50% of the time, the other time she's not going to. I've got a very difficult wife, Andre. She just isn't. She's not perfectly loving all the time, every single instant and every single moment of the day. It's very, very disappointing, but that's just one of those things. Okay. Kevin.
Well, when someone says or does something I don't like with my wife or someone else or situation, I think I need to change something. I don't think the solution is, right here, right now, as I am, just coming to accepting. I'm normally.
Yeah, if you're in at night and there's mosquitoes biting you, you change something. There's no doubt about that. That's a functional requirement.
Yeah.
But that's a functional requirement, what Diananda calls doing the needful. But when we're talking about becoming, it's not about the doing the needful. It is the attempt to find happiness and security where it is not. Okay? Yeah. Robert.
No, it's clear. It's clear what's being meant by samsara. You made it very clear. But it comes down to putting your happiness into objects and.
Yeah, and would you say that sometimes your mode of being is characterized by being a samsari, seeking happiness and security in things other than yourself? Would that be true?
Right.
See, I knew that about you, Robert. I knew you were a samsari. As soon as I met you, I thought, this guy is a samsari. Yeah. Okay,
yeah, that's
good.
why I broke my hand.
Yeah, that's it, yes.
Find happiness in tennis.
So, samsaris annoy me. You know what I mean? They really annoy me. Okay. All right. Okay, John.
Yeah. So I think what you said was becoming is seeking happiness in the external.
Yeah.
I was going to put where Robert was. It's like when we seek objects and things, cars, boats, and all those things. That's that materialism. That's the becoming. That if I just have
but if you just want a boat because you like fishing, that's fine. But it's where we feel that our life and being is at stake, our happiness and security is at stake. That unless I have this, I cannot resolve this pain. People. When you say do a lot of psychotherapy, people come to you and they've got all of these wonderful little ideas of what they think's going to do it for them. Do you know what I mean? And that will resolve their problem. Yeah, that's right. That's true. It's the materialistic thing where finite things are given an absolute value.
Right.
It doesn't matter how people say how spiritual they are. Basically, that Western scripture thing, as a man thinketh in his heart, so that he is.
Right.
Diananda says we give our heart away. We give it to clothing. We give it to money. We give it away so that we're left empty. That's very good, John. Patricia.
And that way of becoming is the word that you use, relentless. It's a chase. It's a chasing after your own tail.
Mm-hmm.
For decades.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And one of the most deadly forms of becoming is spiritual becoming. Mm-hmm. Spiritual becoming, that's deadly. You know what I mean? Where one day I'm going to become noble and virtuous. I'm going to have peace and love all over, that kind of thing, I mean, have you ever seen people engage in...
The cities promise that, right?
Sorry?
The cities promise that.
Of course, yes, that's exactly right. Now, it's a load of old BS, but the thing is that because it's still becoming. All right, now, we always end on a win. So the thing is that, I thought I'd use an American term. So what happens is that the only thing, what's necessary is that we can only resolve ourselves as a becomer by being a beer. By being a beer. Now, the thing is, this is very important. Now, I just want to look at it. You see, when we're becoming, there's no composure. In Latin, compose means, you know, compose music, you put it together, right? So when I'm in self-dissatisfaction, am I together or am I am I split? Am I broken up? Right? So we're told that being, life, light, and fullness is manifest as this universe. Okay? As this universe. That does not mean that God is war, but everything to exist depends upon light, and fullness to have any reality. It's like the waves are dependent on water. The substrate of everything is water. Everything we're looking at is water. You've got rough waves, smooth waves, all kind of waves, right? But that there's what is abidingly present is being. In Vedanta, they use the word sat, don't they, for that? I use the word being because I'm Anglo-Western, and I don't really find Sanskrit helpful. But so here I am. So being is abidingly present, and it's manifesting as this universe, right? Another way to say that is that being is manifesting as this experience right here, right now, as I am. Now, what Swami Dayananda calls this is the living presence of the given. Do you mean the presence of the given? So what he says here is, he says, because it's here, I see it. Because it's here, I see it. Right? Now that means that we're not at any one moment. At any one moment, how often, like right here, right now, as I am, is that available to be recognized and appreciated? Now, the
question of whether can that recognition and appreciation be free of any thought?
No, we're not talking. No, absolutely not. For Dayananda, we're not interested in that because we're interested in being with ourselves as we are. And so if the experience involves thinking, there's thinking. If there's reactions, there's reactions. If it's trees moving, it's trees. You see, to remain with ourselves as we are, let's say that I'm agitated and upset with you, Robert, right? Which would never happen because you're such a warm, wonderful human being, all right? But imagine I'm upset with you, right? What's the actual fact? I'm being upset, is that right? Now, notice what I'm told is the basis of reaction is non-acceptance of a fact. Now, this is interesting, isn't it? Now, so what happens if here I am like this, I want to wring your neck, Robert, right? How'd you like that drama? Was it quite good? Was it quite impressive, that drama? Okay, so, but if I remain with myself just like that, I'm composed, aren't I? I'm together. I'm not actually broken up in between the part that's resisting and the resisted. I'm with myself as I am. Is that true? I may not find it pleasant, but I'm with myself as I am.
Well, here, I guess the question would be, why would you be like this in a reaction, except that?
Yeah, no, you're not getting my, you're not quite meeting my point, Robert. The point is, there's two different ways. I can be angry and I can be trying not to be angry. That's self-dissatisfaction. I hate being what I'm like and I'm trying not to be that way. Have you ever had that experience? Or I can abide in acceptance, complete and utter acceptance. So in other words, I'm being with myself as I am without resistance. Now
and like you say, you don't act, the point is you don't act from it because you're accepting how you.
Well, what I'm doing is, instead of engaging in the process of becoming, I'm actually just being. Being with the given.
That being doesn't result in an action from the reactivity.
No, that's right. That's right. That you'll find you find actually you resolve that way of being in being. But I just want to get this first part. It's very important to learn to remain with ourselves as we are. Right? It's counterintuitive. You see, if I practice Dharma, so I say no matter what, I am not going to dramatize any form of hostility. Very difficult task, by the way, right? In fact, when you commit to doing it, you see how difficult it is. But anyway, what happens is the very fact that I'm not dramatizing it means that I'm going to be thrown back on myself as angry. Would that be true? See, when I get lost in hostility, there's a kind of a release, if you like. Does that make sense? I get lost. But if I don't dramatize, here I am, I want to wring Robert's neck. Right? Now, the thing is that when I am just simply abiding in the presence of the given, the living presence of the given, whatever that is, can you see how I'm in reality? When my mind is filled with what is, the presence of what is, because it's there, I'm seeing it. So because it's there, I'm angry like this. You see, I'm not trying to have any spiritual idealism. I want to remain with myself as I am. I want to remain with the presence of the given, because the teaching tells me the presence of the giving is the presence of the giver. The living presence of the given is the living presence of God made manifest, and I can be in communion with God. Does that make sense? Dayananda says another wonderful thing. He says, the basis of acceptance is the understanding of Ishvara. So I can't accept myself. It's just not possible. But when I am rooted in being, what he means by rooted in Ishvara, that is the basis of self-acceptance, because I'm just full of the presence of the given. When I'm fighting myself, I'm not full of the presence. He says, you're full of yourself. He says, you're full of yourself. Now, this is a remarkable thing. Now, just to give you an idea on this, you see, I just want you to just quietly, you're sitting here, just quietly come back to yourself as you are, just as you are. Yeah.
Could you repeat that full of yourself? Could you reframe that? Could you reframe that for a moment, please? The full of yourself.
All right. You will notice that when you're just with yourself as you are, you become alive to facts. Because they are there, you are seeing it. But you know, if you think that you're looking at an SOB, do you know what I mean? If you think that John is being an insensitive husband, what's happened is you're facing an idea, a reaction. You're having a reaction, aren't you? You're not actually alive to facts. Your notion has transmuted itself into an experience that you think you're facing, but it comes from your own mind, doesn't it? Because you see it, it's there. It's like looking at the snake. So you're full of yourself. You're in what Dayananda says, you're in your world. When we're becoming, we're totally in our world. When you're just simply being, you're in what he calls Ishvara's world. You're filled with the presence of Ishvara. Even if that experience is unpleasant. It doesn't matter whether it's unpleasant. It's just, so it's very important. Now, when you come back to yourself, it's a very interesting thing. You don't have to do the presence of the given. Have you noticed that you don't have to do the presence of the given? You don't have to arrive there, do you? You don't have to engage in space and time in order to get to the presence of the given. Do you produce the presence of the given? No. It's just simply there. Because it's there, it's there. Now what I want you to do, I want you to do a little experiment. I don't want you to try and be yourself, because you don't have to try to be yourself. You are what you are here. We're not Buddhists. We're not trying to be mindful and that sort of stuff, right? So, but what I want you to do is I want you to remain with yourself, and all I want you to take note of is this. You come back to yourself. As soon as you feel a little bit of, resistance, pushing, just simply stop the pushing. Just simply go negative as far as any form of resistance. Does that make sense? Don't do anything else. Just remain with yourself. And as soon as you notice that kind of little bit of, you know what I mean? Just simply go, and then just simply avoid the resistance. Does that make sense? With the understanding that when you resist, that's the basis of reaction. So what you're interested in doing is simply remaining with yourself as you are. If that means boredom, thoughts, sensations, who cares? The coming and going is out of your hands, but you're going to just simply remain with yourself. In other words, you're going to be. Does that make sense? Now, the thing is, when you're filled with the presence of the given, that is the only thing that lifts you out of becoming. Now get that? The only thing that lifts you out of becoming is not your action. When I am filled with the presence of the given, that very presence of the given lifts me out of my world. Does that make sense? The very presence of the given is it's like the presence of the given intrudes in on my life, takes up all the room and lifts me out of me, draws me out of me. Okay, so let's just come back. We're going to come back here. So just do this. We're just going to come back. Notice there's a feeling of ourselves sitting here. Don't care what's given, but we're just interested in just remaining with our experience completely as it is, the presence of the given in whatever form it's in. We might become aware of sounds, we might become aware of thoughts, sensations. But the main thing is that we're with ourselves without resistance. So if we're just going to just simply, we can't do being. But when we're full of being, which is to be full of the presence of the given, we find ourselves different. We find ourselves being simple. Simple in Latin means no parts. We've just got no part. We're just simply being. Okay, what did you notice, Judy?
Just, it was just not, there was no effort.
No.
And things were just happening.
Right, now wasn't it, but notice how in being, was there any ego satisfaction like, oh, I'm being so spiritual, I can't believe myself?
No, there was no me there. Actually.
Okay, that's right. There's no me as personality. And there was no, oh my goodness, I'm not getting this. I can't understand this. I can't get it, is it? It's not like that either, is it?
Right. But there was the going off and coming in though. Like
that's fine because that's the given. That's the presence of the given coming and going. Who cares? You see, this is very important. We're not interested in, you see, Swami Dayananda said, you know, when I went to see him one day and I said, look, Swamiji, I said, look, you said in the book, you said about bring your mind to yourself and never and think of no other thing. But you said in this other book here, and he looked at me and looks at me, he goes, just be your simple, naked self. It was like he got angry at me, right? But the thing was, and I went back to my room with my tail between my legs. And, you know, I was, because I was an intellectual and I was trying to understand this. I'm trying to understand it. You know what I mean? Right? He was inviting me to be. And then I found myself in this, here was this ordinary experience, just ordinary experience. Like, you know, here I am, this ordinary, unadorned human being who didn't really understand anything and was very upset the fact that I couldn't understand it, right? the thing is that here I was just with myself, ordinary, and then the ordinary presence of the given took up all the room, and then suddenly I was shifted out of this confused, struggling, wanting to understand type person. Are you with me? So notice how when you are simply being, the downside of just simply being is that you as personality is resolved. But there's no ego satisfaction and there's no ego dissatisfaction, and therefore it's missed. Therefore, we just overlook it. But the living presence of the given is always here. When we're filled up with that living presence of the given, we change as an individual because we're lifted out of becoming. Are we clear on this? This is, I know it's very simple, but so profoundly important. Okay, Michelle.
I noticed that there was I felt a strength inside that I actually was surprised to find.
Mm-hmm.
And there was also, it was a lot easier to just accept.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's like we make our lives a lot harder than it needs to be, really.
Well, what happens is when we've got the resisted dualism, we always believe it's the resisted that's the problem. We don't realize that the problem is me as a resistor, because when me as a resistor disappears, the SOB that I was facing also disappears.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
And also, yeah. And also, like I was noticing that when I have an argument,
yep.
If I actually just try to be, or just try to get back to being, the argument is I kind of fall away, because if there is less resistance, where's the fight?
Yeah. The other thing too, I just want to clarify. It's very important. The basis of a self-acceptance is the understanding of Ishvara. If you understand that the presence of God is your solution, the presence of God appreciated is the transformative factor. Dhananda says the way to invite Ishvara into your life is by being aware of him. Being aware of him is being aware of the presence of the given, because God isn't away from the presence of the given. Mm-hmm. That really helps, because you then understand that you as a suffering person, the meaning of it is that you're cut off from God. You're cut off from the appreciation of the presence of God. That changes. That means then you won't be you won't ever, I'm not saying you do this, but sometimes we can get in, I've used to try and accept myself and try and release and try and let go and try and accept, but I was unaccepting. So when I realized that I could remain as an unaccepting person, and because that's just the fact, and then just simply remain as that, the fact of the matter is God draws you into his heart anyway. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. From there, you'll find you'll be getting composed and it changes. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. But provided that you take refuge in being. The whole point is to take refuge in being. That is what lifts us out of this obsessive becoming. And we're not trying to do it forever. We're just trying to do it. We're just right here, right now, as we are, we're going to do it here. And then right here, right now, as we are, our understanding is going to free us. Does that make sense? We're living the vision that everything here is God. And when we live that vision, because when I remain with myself as I am, it is the most honest act, isn't it? Let's say I'm stuffed up and confused, right? I'm remaining with myself as stuffed up and confused. I am being with God, according to Dhananda. He says an appointment with yourself is an appointment with the Lord. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that wonderful? Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, that's good. All right.
Now I have a question though. Mm-hmm. How do we apply this in the face of something that is really off, like unethical or abusive?
Yeah, no, exactly the same. Like this is what they mean by remaining the same. How they say yoga is sameness.
Yeah.
If you remain with your experience as it is, even if it's unpleasant, even if you're morally indignant about because a lot of what we face we can do nothing about. We're helpless before it.
Yeah. Okay.
We hate helplessness, but there's a lot of things you're going to do in your life you cannot do anything about. Most, in fact, right? So All we have is that we understand that what's important is me living in the kingdom, not being lost in the world. You know, when Christ said, you know, my kingdom is not of this world, we put all our eggs in the basket of the world. Forget that. It's no hope there. A lot of it's going to be bad. It's going to be, you know, I mean, people die. There's war. There's killing. There's violence. There's all sorts of stuff going on, isn't there? So what do? Wait till we change the world into some utopian dream, which like the Marxists say? No, that's not going to work. So it's a question of where we know that irrespective of what, if I can remain with myself as I am, and what Dayananda called resting in the lap of Ishvara, taking refuge in God, I'm not denying anything, but I'm no longer a reactive, reacting. I'm no longer engaging in the process of becoming in the face of it. I mean, I do what I can, you know, like, you know, if mosquitoes are biting you, Dayananda says you got to fix the mosquitoes, you know what I mean? Like, if you can, you know what I mean? But he even says, even your best efforts are a lot of the time not going to work. Even your best efforts are lots of time not going to work. So what do we do with that? We can only remain with ourselves and take refuge in being.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, Andre, what did you notice?
Well, I noticed that when I am beer, I'm not a becomer. And it's
very good, yes.
It's very, very, how to say, very resting.
Yes.
That there is no pressure from individuality because there is no individuality. There is no me as individual.
Yeah, well, there might be you as an individual, but there's no you as a personality, as an object to yourself.
Yeah, sure.
So the self-objectification isn't there. Just bear in mind, so we can be formally correct. First is coming into relationship to God as manifest in the presence of the given. So we're coming into relationship. It's communion with God. In Vedanta, there's another step, which is our oneness with God, where that isn't there. I don't really go into that, but Dayananda said this has to happen first. Okay?
Yeah, I mean,
you can't bypass this. You can't go, you see, to appreciate that the life, light, and fullness that is God is the life, my life as it is my life, is you know, the thing of, you know, my Father and I are one and non-duality. That comes after. But at the moment we're transformed as an individual. We find ourselves being composed, right? We find ourselves being free because we're not being determined by what's happening. And we find ourselves, more importantly, being at home with ourselves. That frees us from self-dissatisfaction. But that self-dissatisfaction, we can only be free when we're being at home with ourselves. That means being at home with ourselves when we're just feeling totally confused. It's a wonderful thing not to be afraid of your reactions. It's a wonderful thing not to be afraid of your painful reactions. It really is, actually. All right, that's good, Andre. Robert, we're looking forward to some great things from you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go.
Isn't the greatest thing silence?
Yeah. Well, that's a good point that you bring up. When you're composed, and remember the Latin compose means together. So even if I'm angry, I'm with myself and this composition, I'm composed. The friction's gone, isn't it? And so, so straight away, there is a, inverted commas, quietness. Does that make sense? That's true. And eventually, Swami Dayananda says that we own up to that silence as ourselves. But at the big, he says, first of all, he says you have to appreciate in relative form, it's an attitude, before you, as an adjective before a noun. So instead of being peace itself, you are peaceful as an individual. You're psychologically free as an individual, and you're at home with yourself as an individual. So it's He says that's the adjective. You can describe that. You know what I mean? But that's different from when I am being life, light, and when I am being the life, light, and fullness that is God. That's the ultimate in Vedanta. Within that, they say, I mean, I don't know much about that, so I don't really go into it. But it's basically there is only God. That's the vision. There is only God. So there's not God in me. But this, what I'm talking about, is it's God in me. I'm coming in to communion with God, but let's not belittle that. That's a good thing. Let's not go, well, I want the upper stuff. You know what I mean? Don't get into that one. That's a mistake. So you got any comments, Robert? So what did you notice when you did it?
It just, yeah, there's an effortlessness and it just, there's an ease and sort of a lack of just, you know, you're just there. That's
it's simple, yes. You're there because you're filled up with the presence of God or the presence of the given. You are conscious, but it's not you. It's not you trying to make yourself conscious. You see, as soon as you remain with God, you can't help but take on his attributes. If you notice, as our Western tradition would say, you can't help it. Do you know what I mean? So what happens is you become true and real, don't you? Because God is true and real. All the rest is lies and gibberish, actually. Do you know what I mean? And you notice, too, that when you're just with yourself, there's no enemies or allies, is there? You're living in a different world. You're what, in our Western scriptures, you're in the world, but not of it. When you're becoming, you are of the world. It is a terrible form of darkness, and it's good to be recognized as darkness because then you'll want to move away from it. But if you justify it and you think you're going to try and find happiness in this process of becoming, you can forget it. John.
It's funny. I've been reflecting on sure the course of this time here. Is the classic tale of the footsteps in the sand. You know, there's two steps and then you become one. And how classic it is to becoming and being. Because when you have that pain, you're in the, you know, you're in line with God, you're in line with Ishvara when you're having the two steps, and all of a sudden there was pain, there was something, and you said, well, your fault. You're becoming, and that's exactly when you fell out. If you had just saw the bee, that he was the one that was carrying you.
He's carrying you, yes.
Right. It's kind of I never looked at it from this becoming and being.
Because what he's done is his very presence is he draws you out of becoming. Right. You don't draw yourself out. The presence of God draws you out. That's the important thing. So God is continually drawing you to himself. That's why if you remain there, you don't remain the same. You as you get drawn in, you find yourself being more and more composed, more and more free, and more at home. And you find that there's a depth here that you would not have thought about. And not only is there a depth that spreads wide too, it affects more aspects of your life the more you get into it. Correct. That's very good, John. Yeah. But it's good, isn't it, to essentialize, go to this really basic stuff that he talks about, because the basic stuff's the advanced stuff, John.
Yeah, exactly.
And in all his books, there's no hidden secret here. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, Patricia.
That's over and over what I'm finding. It's so simple, but so elusive.
Yeah, that's right. It is. And that's why we, you know how, like he said, there's four things for Vedanta. You have to have the teacher, you have to have the teaching, you have to have the time, and you talk to fellow students, and that's what we're doing. It's very important to get together and talk with fellow students. Very good. Kevin.
Look, the primary thing was just to find myself abiding in being as peaceful, despite the fact that functions. You know, I'm still aware. I'm aware of thoughts, movements.
Yep.
Even when you're talking now, I can understand. I don't have to struggle to understand you. It's just, you know.
Isn't it a great thing, Kevin, that the embrace of God, the embrace of being, is always here? It embraces you exactly as you are. It doesn't remove itself because you're naughty or bad or not pure enough or any of that stuff. Does that make sense? It is abidingly, constantly embracing you, and when we become aware of that embrace, we find ourselves lifted out. This is the basis of real spirituality. Do you know what I mean? Doesn't involve me as a spiritual becomer. Do you know what I mean? I can only be a recipient of this, actually. It is given. And the understanding of the teaching opens the door to it. You got something more to say, Kevin?
Just in terms of what someone else was talking about earlier, it just came to mind about, like, when I'm upset, having experienced it, and I'm ruminating about something someone said, like my wife or whatever.
Yep.
In that, I think I'm very conscious. I think I'm being in touch with my feelings, but
yeah.
In actual fact, I'm identified with my thought processing, and I take that to mean my life.
Yeah,
you're with my life at that moment, and I actually think I'm convinced that's my life.
And you're convinced you're conscious, and you're convinced, and what happens is you're experiencing your life and being as a psychophysical entity, struggling to find happiness in a world that ain't doing it properly. Yeah, that's exactly right.
When I just come to through the grace or the presence of reality, intruding in on that.
Yes.
So I suddenly find myself abiding in being.
Yes.
That I realized I can only really see then the folly, the falseness,
that's right,
and the unreality, the delusion of the other, which is not normal human life.
Yes, it is. Yeah, and notice too that, you know, when you're walking down the road and then suddenly, you know, the presence of what is comes in. Who's ever had that experience? You're walking down the road, you're caught up in imagination, and then suddenly the presence of reality comes in and scoops you up. Who's noticed that? God reaches out to you. You know, we don't know God. God knows us, actually. The reason is that reality comes in and it makes itself known to us. Does that make sense? By the very presence of the given. And when we are filled with the presence of given, we're filled with the presence of God. That's what makes us conscious. The transformative factor is not me being clever and smart and intellectual and all of this nonsense. Does that make sense? The whole point is to be able to abide in like what Dayananda called it, being relaxed in the lap of Ishvara. Because when you're being that, you're being accepting. Does you get the difference? You're not accepting yourself, you are being accepting. Do you see the difference? So you're actually living the vision. Everything here is the presence of God. He says this understanding is the basis of self-acceptance. This whole idea of who's ever tried to accept themselves because they heard that was a good idea? Who's ever tried to accept themselves? I'm going to accept myself. I'm going to. Who's ever tried that? And who's ever failed at accepting themselves? Exactly, you can't accept yourself. You are self-accepting when you are resting in the presence of God. We clear? That's when you find yourself acceptable, as far as Dayananda is concerned. Magnificent teaching, isn't it? Who teaches like this? Do you know, really? Do you know what I mean? Really? When there was no one like him, really. Okay, so just before we wrap up, so what's become clearer as a result of what we've been talking about tonight, Judy?
I really have been having a lot of becomingness with my son, and rather than being with my son. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to see what happens now that we've had this, perception shift. It's not that I didn't remember, but you forget. And so that's why I agree totally when coming together in community, it helps just,
of course it does.
There's been so many years of processing a certain way. Yes. And now, even though there's the comprehension, there's the awareness of it, to stay there is more, it's not it is effortless, but there, as Patricia was clearly saying, it's very elusive sometimes.
Yes, so, and the thing too, when we practice remaining the same in the face of changing experiences, this is what sameness means. So, sameness is not possible without God. He said there's no karma yoga without Ishvara.
Right.
So once we know what it means to be in the lap of Ishvara, being accepting, we practice remaining as that in the face of when our son does something we don't like, and we have reactions about what they're doing, we remain the same in the face of both those things. What he's doing in our reactions, we remain accepting. Remain accepting is we're remaining with God. Does that make sense? Even if it's unpleasant, even if you want to wring his neck, it doesn't matter. That is still remaining with God. Does that make sense? And so it's a religious practice, but it's not. It's what Dayananda calls living a vision. It's not something you do. It's
exactly
living a. How he says the Vedanta is you. So this understanding of that there is God, that's something you're being that understanding. It is you. So we live the understanding of Vedanta. It's not something we apply. It's not a theory that we apply.
Yeah, it's not another fix-it method.
No, it's not. It doesn't have anything to do with becoming. They're very good.
Yeah, exactly.
Michelle.
I think what I'm getting is I think we need to be conscious of the environment and ourselves. Maybe bring up a heightened perception so that we can actually appreciate just being.
Yeah, but I just wanted to say something. Awareness is not our ego function. What happens is that when the presence of the given comes in and we let it take up all the room, if you like, then we find that heightened perception is just given.
Yes, that's it. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, perception and awareness together will give us that that presence of God.
It's not our action. It's the fact of the matter is that when we're filled with the presence of the given, we find ourselves being conscious and alive and awake to things, but it's not. Awareness is not our function. We find ourselves embraced in awareness, because how Sat is Chit, we find ourselves embraced in the light of awareness, and in the light of that awareness, we see clearly. Because
so was I putting it? Yeah, but was I putting it backwards then?
Yeah, a little bit, because we say we've got to do this. We don't do this. It's an understanding that opens. Once we understand that it's the presence of God appreciated, which is the transformative factor, I can then go, I better just let the presence of the given come in. I just go quiet.
And so wouldn't awareness make that happen?
It's not my awareness, though.
No, the awareness.
Yeah, the thing is that even the thought of remembering this is a reality coming in, and so once I understand, once I have the spiritual understanding that the presence of the given is the presence of the giver, I can pause at any moment and I can let the presence of the given come in, can't I? Because I understand that's what my salvation is. And then I also will accept whatever's here because that's what the presence of the given is. God is not away from any aspect of my experience, even painful experiences.
Okay. Yeah, I have to work with the fact that, that there's a personalization of God and I don't relate to that very well.
No. It's personal in the sense it's very personal in the sense that you that you're embraced by this light of awareness that enfolds you. You know, I'm using metaphors here, right? But it enfolds you.
Okay.
And it's not just dead energy of the physicists. It's just, you know, it's very active in relation to human beings. It has a dynamic effect on us when we actually appreciate its embrace. And so it's not like dead energy. Do you know what I mean? It's not dead energy. It's not like this.
No.
It's more personal than personal. St. Augustine says God is closer to us than we are to ourselves. But it's not, when we talk about God from a Vedantic point of view, God is life, sat, life, real life, not becoming, life. That life is also light and also fullness. So that
that's better.
So we're not, I use the word God, but I use the word God because it's not just simply this non-personal thing like Star Wars, the Force and all that stuff. It's actually, it is abidingly present, and it's entirely benevolent. We know that because when we come into contact with it, we're lifted out of our suffering.
Okay.
And when we're abiding in it, we become fearless. We notice that too. That's why we come composed. We're lifted out of our fear.
Okay.
So it's not just some abstract notion. That's all. It's the living presence of reality, if you like. That's constantly enfolding you and calling you to itself. And when you just let go, it draws you to itself. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Andre, what did you what may come clearer tonight for you?
Everything.
Yeah.
Everything come clear. Look, I'm thinking about my habitual like being not a beer but becomer.
Mm-hmm.
How can I change this habitual like being becomer?
Yeah. Well, as soon as you ask that question, you've gone away from the actual present moment, and so what happens is, once you understand it's only right here, right now as you are, you're not going to try to do it forever or try and get out of it forever. You're just simply going to imagine that whenever you notice that you're in the cold room, dark and dingy room, you go, oh, it's cold, and you go to the warm room. And then you'll fall away, and then it'll call you back and you go back. Does that make sense? So don't worry about how to or how long or any of that. Just worry about right here, right now as you are, Andre, right? The question is you'll either appreciate yourself as being, or you'll be lost in becoming and you won't even know that anyway. Because when you're lost in becoming, you don't notice until you're out of it. But take refuge every time you notice it. Does that make sense? And what will happen is the more you take refuge in it, the more it starts to become settled, if you like. You get more rooted in it. That's this whole practice of karma yoga, remaining the same in the face of changing events. And the more you commit to remaining the same, you'll notice clearer when you fall away, which you will do continually, by the way. I fall away every day. I'm a becomer. I have a PhD in becoming. Good. Is that clear, Andre?
Yes.
Yeah. There's always the same solution. It's only the only solution is in being. And like what St. Thomas Aquinas says, being has no parts. Everything else is composition and comes and goes. You know what I mean? Being is abidingly present. And the more we're rooted in being, that transforms our experience. It lifts us out of all our world. We're brought into Ishvar's world, as he says. Okay, good. Robert, what's clearer from tonight?
what's clearer is the breadth of the meaning of becoming. So it sort of gives a very strong basis for, I guess you'd say, discriminating between becoming and being.
That's it. That's the Vedanta method. They juxtapose two things to show what each other is. Yeah. Yeah. Very good, Robert. John.
To modify Shakespeare, to be or not to be, that is our choice.
Yeah. Well, and that's actually true. You know, like in our Western scriptures, we have that beautiful saying from the Old Testament, I think it is, choose ye this day which master you're going to serve.
Correct.
And once we know the difference, there is a choice in a sense. Does that make sense? As soon as we notice we're getting lost or whatever, we come back to God. Do you know what I mean? We root ourselves in being. We desist from being a becomer, which means we're left at ourselves, and then this self that we're left with, that undergoes a transformation. It's what Dayananda calls resolution of ego into Ishvara. That's what he calls it, where you resolve ego into Ishvara. He says it is very important. Yeah. Very good. Patricia.
Historically, I always had an issue with the spiritual mumbo jumbo of letting go. And in this process of remembering,
yep,
it helps me to get out of my own way.
Exactly right, because in the embrace of being, you're lifted. That's you don't let go. God lifts you out of yourself, the self you take yourself to be, and brings you to himself. So you're rooted in being. And you don't do it. And I know what you mean. I used to try and be accepting, you know what I mean? I really used to try and accept, you know, and I just couldn't, and you can't.
No, because it creeps up the backside and it's still
it's becoming, and then you fail at it and you get it or whatever. But if you just simply remain with what is, there's no winning, no losing. And as the way Dayananda says, you invite Ishvara into your life by being aware of him. Notice how it's cognitive. There's no becoming. It's just simply being aware of the presence of the given, which is the presence of the giver, according to the teaching. And the more and what happens is we understand this more and more as we notice how we're always learning about the same thing, Patricia? Yeah.
We need it.
Yeah. Kevin.
Again, I'm just amazed by the meaning behind the presence of the given is the presence of the giver.
Yes.
Because when just through the presence of the given takes up all the room, I find myself conscious without any effort on my part.
Yes.
Whether it's I'm walking or whether I'm driving,
Mm-hmm.
I can think I'm conscious, you know, I'm not bumping into traffic and stuff like that, but it highlights that I'm in a thinking process, because when suddenly I find the presence of trees, roads, cars take up all the room, I suddenly find myself, you know,
being aware. Being aware
with no thinking initiation from my part. I just, you know, Dayananda might describe it as suspend thought, and then invite the presence of reality to take up all the room.
Yes.
And it just happens with no
in the spiritual
on my part.
In the spiritual literature, they call it, you know, choiceless awareness. In other words, it's awareness that's not the result of choice or will. It's just here. All right. Well, very, very nice seeing all of you again. Look after yourself, and we'll catch up on Thursday. Can you hang a bit, Robert?
Okay.
All right. So everyone, goodbye. Look after yourselves. Nice to see you again, Andre, as always, our Russian mate. All right. Look after yourself.
Thank you, Bede.
Bye-bye.